Hi, my name is Kim McMillan. I want to say that this has been like happiness to be in a room with people interested in social justice. And to have Fania Davis here is truly an honor. I lived in the Oakland area for about 30 years, and this issue of restorative justice, of working towards healing our youth, is something that should be in all of our hearts. It makes a difference in the very fact that Fania Davis has made this a life mission, makes her qualified for sainthood. Because our youth, it's something that people walk away from. And I think that's one of the issues that we've had to deal with in this society, the walking away from issues that have been just too difficult to handle. Now, some of her background is she came of age in Birmingham, Alabama, during the social ferment of the civil rights era, and the murder of two close childhood friends in the 1963 Sunday school bombing crystallized within Fania a passionate commitment to social transformation. And for the next decade, she actively engaged with social issues. I really want to say actively engaged because one of the things that we find is that we can pay lip service to change, to making this world a better place. But for someone like Fania, it's not lip service, it's a real commitment and I believe it becomes a higher calling because you're working, to me, a mission for social change, a mission to basically enlighten the world. And she's doing that to a tremendous calling. And I want to say it's also a mission that you're not going to always get accolades. Particularly, I lived in Oakland. I've been to meetings with young people where we ask them questions like, why are you doing this? And I remember going to a meeting where young people were saying, one of the reasons, these are African American kids, that we are behaving in ways that you think is not appropriate is because we're not seen. And that we're doing whatever we need to do to be seen. And so restorative justice really speaks to actually seeing people, actually opening your eyes to what our youth are capable of, and that means capable of with regard to the inner, the things that they came to the planet to do, and restoring that within them that has been exercised by a society that does not always see them. And I want you all to give a really warm welcome to Fania Davis. Thank you so much for being here.
Greetings, everyone. Wow, I could have heard you all night. You said you could have gone on and on. I could have gone on and on listening to you. Thank you so much, Kim, for that wonderful introduction. And your introduction inspires me to greet you in the South African way, in the Zulu South African way. Sawubona. Sawubona. If you're in the marketplace, you will be greeted in this way. If you're walking down the road, you will be greeted in this way traditionally. And this means, I see you. I see beyond the exterior. I see the gift that you are to the world. I see your spirit. I see your ancestors. I see your authentic self. This is so much a part of the work that we are doing in restorative justice, as Kim indicated, that we're doing with youth who are not seen, who are not heard, who have no sense of belonging, and who therefore cannot thrive. So I ask you to turn to one another and say, Sawubona. Okay, so one of you can say Sawubona, and the other one can say Yebo, Sawubona. That means yes. Yes, I see you too. So I want to begin with honoring the ancestors of this land, the spirits of this land, the keepers of this land. This is a colonized land upon which we stand. So I want to begin by honoring the Yolkut people, the Chumash people, the Miwok people. I also wish to begin by just acknowledging the 4 who were stabbed at UC Merced. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday, yeah. And also a word of silence for the young man who did the stabbing and for the suffering that he must have been experiencing to have done what he did, and for the suffering of all of the families on both sides, because there are people who are hurt on both sides. I want to acknowledge the organizers of this wonderful conference. I think obviously it's a timely topic, social activism today with what's going on in the world. And what did you say a little bit earlier, Victor? You got to be crazy if you don't want to change. I mean, something about changing the world. If you don't want, what did you say?
Make your arrangements. You're ready to step off the planet if you don't want to change it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's almost as if we just don't have a choice, you know? And it's the youth, historically, who are the ones who step up. History calls on the youth to make the change that needs to be made. Because us old folk, we are part of the thought processes and consciousness that created the mess. We need your creativity, a lot of creativity. We need your fresh ideas. It was the children of Birmingham, Alabama, the children who dismantled segregation. It was the young people, the college students in Raleigh, North Carolina, who started the sit-in. The old folks didn't want them to do it. They did it anyway. And it just swept the South. It ignited just hundreds and hundreds of sit-ins through the South. It was a child who first actually tried to integrate the buses in Montgomery before Rosa Parks. She was Claudette Colvin, 15 years old. But she wasn't lifted up as the plaintiff in a test case that would go to the Supreme Court because she was a 15-year-old girl who was pregnant. The Panthers, yeah, they were like 18, huh? Y'all know. You got some personal experience over here? She was there. Yeah. 17, 18, younger than you all. Uh-huh. Yeah. The Brown Berets, Chicanos, Raza, they were like your age. The Young Lords, Puerto Ricanos, they were your age. It was young people in the Arab Spring, young people in Tiananmen Square. So history is calling upon you all. And so it's a great preparation to have this conference. So thank you so much to Jim and the other organizers of this beautiful conference. And you know, when I hear the word social justice activism or social activism in Central Valley, who do I think of? I don't think I've been here before. Maybe I've been, but a long time ago. But I think of who? Cesar, yeah. And Dolores Huerta. Delano is only 150 miles away from here, right? Yeah. So I really want to acknowledge him being in this land, which is his land, and Dolores Huerta, who still is with us today. Yeah. And she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom not so long ago. Yeah. And I also want to say that there's a man by the name of Larry Itliong. Do you know who that is? Filipino man. He is actually the one who called the strike in September of 1965, September 8, 1965, the grape strike against the growers. Everyone thinks it was Cesar Chavez and the National Farm Workers Union, but it was actually this Filipino organization. I can't remember the name of it right now. But Larry Itliong was honored just about a month ago when the governor of California inaugurated Larry Itliong Day on his birthday, October 25th. So this unsung hero of your land, the Central Valley, who was the one who was responsible in large part for that strike, side by side with Cesar Chavez, is now being sung, is now being honored. So can we give him a hand? I want to share with you a little bit more about my story. As Kim said, I was born in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama. You may know it as Birmingham, but it was called Birmingham, still is called Birmingham, because of the frequency of the bombings of churches and of individuals who were active in the civil rights movement at that time. So I grew up during a time of apartheid, during a time of great racial violence. I lived literally in a neighborhood that was called, and still is called, Dynamite Hill. I lived on the top of that hill. It was called Dynamite Hill because that was a neighborhood where blacks were pushing the color line, and retrogressive whites in the community were bombing our homes in response. We were fortunate, our home was never bombed, but homes around us were. Two of my closest friends were killed in the Birmingham Sunday School bombing, September 15th, 1963. Everybody knows about that, yes? Yeah. So I left the South with this fierce determination and yearning to do all that I could do to create a different kind of world, without racism, without racial violence. And I became involved in many movements after the Civil Rights Movement, my first movement as a child. When I went to college, I became involved in the Black Student Union movement. I actually became involved in a very nationalist movement, anti-white. I kind of, went from that experience in the South to actually hating white people. And I remember once, because my mother and father stayed in Alabama, all the siblings, there were 4 of us, left to go to school, but we would always come back home during the holidays. And I remember one Christmas, my brother, who was in the National Guard at that time, brought home a colleague from the National Guard. And I came to the door to greet him, my brother, and I see this white man in the car. And I said, no, he is not entering this house. And stood literally at the doorway and did not allow him in. Of course, that reminds me of somebody else, an historic figure doing the same thing in slightly different circumstances around that time. That would have been Governor George Wallace. Governor George Wallace stood in the doorway of University of Alabama so that Arthurine Lucy, the first black student to enter, could not enter. Finally, the Kennedys sent down the National Guard, and she was allowed to enter. But I just share that because I want you to understand the rage that I was feeling, the hatred that I was feeling, the anger that I was feeling. And I channeled it into activism. I became involved in the Black Panther movement. I became involved in the women's movement, in the anti-imperialist movement, in the socialist movement, in the anti-apartheid movement, in economic justice movements, and almost all the major movements of my time, I was a part of them. Then when I was in my early 20s, when we were working with the Black Panther Party, The police invaded my home and shot my husband and almost killed him. I actually jumped on the back of the officer who was trying to shoot my husband and hit the gun up, so the rest of the bullets went up the wall. But my husband narrowly escaped death. The bullet was just a few millimeters away from his spine. Not long after that, my sister Angela Davis, how many of you know who Angela Davis is? Good, most, yeah. And for those of you who don't, I'm sure you'll Google her when you leave here, or if not now, on your phones. But Angela, my sister, was very involved in the prisoner rights movement at that time. This is 1970. She identified as a Marxist, a powerful intellectual who actually studied Marx and Hegel and Kant in German institutions of higher learning, came home and started teaching at UCLA, teaching Marxism. There were so many students that they couldn't all fit inside, thousands of students who came to her lectures. Ronald Reagan, then the governor, fired her because of her political affiliations. Then we filed a lawsuit, and that was reversed, and Angela came back to teach. However, she was charged with murder and conspiracy to murder in August of 1970. It didn't work. Ronald Reagan was not able to silence her by firing her, and this was the next thing that happened to my sister. So she was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Then she was captured in October of 1970. So I became involved in her case, speaking all over the world, organizing this massive movement for her freedom, which was ultimately successful. In June of 1972, she was acquitted of all charges. I see somebody raising a fist in the back. All right. Yeah. And I became a lawyer in part because of my sister's experience, fighting racism in the courts. So I was this warrior for justice, this filled with rage. And to be a successful trial attorney, I had to cultivate hyper-rationality, hyper-masculinist qualities, because I had to decimate my adversary on cross-examination, right? I had to prove that they are right and that they are wrong. Must be my healing side that's coming out. That they are wrong and we are right, that they are guilty and we are innocent. So after 30 years of this anger, I felt out of balance. And I kind of knew intuitively that I needed more healing energies in my life, and more spiritual energies, more feminine, more creative energies. So I ended up serendipitously enrolling in this program, a graduate program that allowed me to get my PhD by working with African healers. So I went to Africa and studied with especially a Zulu healer by the name of Usama Zulu Credo Mutwa. And I could feel myself coming back into balance. I came back home, and then I learned about restorative justice at a conference. How many of you know what restorative justice is? Okay. Does anybody want to just talk about your understanding of restorative justice? I saw a hand coming up here. Was it yours? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a justice that restores communities and families. Mm-hmm. Good. Any other additions to that understanding of what restorative justice is? Restore wrongs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a big part of restorative justice is bringing together the persons who caused harm with the persons who were harmed. Yeah. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about what restorative justice is, but continuing with my story, that narrative, when I heard about this restorative justice, a justice that heals instead of harms, a justice that seeks to repair damage damaged relationships rather than damage them further. A justice that seeks to create peace instead of deepening conflict. I had an epiphany because the lawyer, the healer, and the warrior could be integrated in me. I could be all of those things at once. For a long time, I didn't feel that to be an effective lawyer or activist, that I could have compassion, you know. So finding out about restorative justice really was very, very life-changing for me. And from there, I went around the world and learned more about restorative justice, studied with leaders in the movement, and ended up founding an organization in Oakland called Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. We have been going since 2005. Our first project was a pilot project at a middle school in West Oakland. And that project was successful in completely eliminating violence. It was a school where there were a lot of fights all the time. It was also a school where we were able to reduce suspensions by 87%. And that's really significant because we know that when our youth are suspended, once even, they have they triple the chances of being incarcerated, or the suspension triples the chances of them being incarcerated. If they're suspended once, their chance of dropping out doubles. And once they drop out from school, they are very likely to be incarcerated. 75% of the nation's inmates are high school dropouts, right? So keeping a kid in school is the strongest protective factor against incarceration. We were talking about the impact on life expectancy of trauma. For every year that a person serves in prison, 2 years comes off their life. It diminishes their life expectancy by 2 years. You know what I'd like to do? Because I'm feeling that we need a little bit more energy. Can we all stand up for a moment? And I need energy too. So okay, what I think I'll have you do is a little qigong. Like Victor, this work that we do, this healing work in the world, is also, it means that we must also do healing work on ourselves. So I have a qigong practice and a yoga practice and a meditation practice as well, so that we can model the healing that we'd like to see in the world outside of us. So let's, just to begin to get some energy, tap our skulls. You probably do a little of this tapping. Yeah. Just lightly tap the front brain. Mm-hmm. And then going back, and just cover the lower neck, the lower skull. And wherever on your skull you feel that you'd like to have a little stimulation. This should wake us up a little bit. Good. And then let's try the ears. You're going to sort of pinch the ears in this, using your thumb and forefinger in this way, okay? And you're going to grab the earlobe. Just bring it down gently, just a few times. And then go up the outer ridge of the earlobes gradually, pulling your ear out again, as if you're going to unfold that fold. And continue to go up the earlobe till you get to the top, and pull the ear up, up, up. And then come back down again. Okay. And if you have space, you may not, well, let's just do a little shaking. Oops, I'm not going to shake too much because I got this microphone on me. And this is something that that Victor does a lot, probably too. It's yeah. Arms out, arms up, arms down, Just let it all go. Actually, this is a scientifically validated trauma release technique. If you see animals in the wild, say an antelope that's been chased by a big cat, but narrowly escapes, they lie on the ground and just shake out, shake it out, shake it out, shake it out. They don't have flashbacks. They don't have PTSD. Because all of that trapped energy from the fight, flight, or freeze response is released. Yeah. I want to do something else too. What do you think, Victor? Vista? Oh, good, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Then you can do the other arm. Oh, you have to come up here and lead that so people can see you. You can also, I don't know if you can go down your legs. It may be a little difficult. You want to come up here and lead that? No. I think it's cute. Anybody else have any requests? No. Okay, good, good. Maybe you're feeling a little tingling in your body, a little bit more aliveness. Great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that pilot project that I was telling you about that we got started in 2005 at a school in West Oakland. After just about a year, violence was completely eliminated. The kids didn't fight one another anymore. The teachers stopped leaving after 1 year. Attrition rate was completely eliminated. Test scores went up. Kids who were outside in the playground, when they had differences, would come in and say, Ms. Alfred, she was a restorative justice coordinator at the school, we need a talking piece. We need to sit down and have a circle because we don't want to have a fight. And then there was a little boy about 2 blocks away from the school one day, 2 little boys that were starting actually to fight one another. A parent was just coming by, and she happened to know about the program at the school, so she hauled both the boys into the school, into the peacemaking room, and so the little boy said, we can't fight at school, and now we can't even fight in the neighborhood. That's right, that's right. So there was a cultural change at the school. We were using circles not only after harm had occurred as an alternative to suspensions, but also to create greater social emotional intelligence in the youth so that they could talk about their differences instead of just reflexively fighting about them. The school district was impressed by these results, and UC Berkeley Law also did a study. And they, with some organizing from youth, adopted restorative justice as official school policy. And they didn't just let that resolution sit on the shelf collecting dust. Today, some 10 years later, well, I guess it hasn't been 10 years, so our pilot was in 2006, the policy change was made in 2010, and today, after 5 years, there is a $2.3 million budget for restorative justice in Oakland schools, and it is in, thank you. And it's in 30 schools. We have 30 full-time restorative justice coordinators, peacemakers basically, plus 10 more at the district level, 40 full-time restorative justice coordinators now in Oakland Unified School District. And the results are really pretty amazing. There was a study that just came out in January on the implementation and impacts of this district-wide restorative justice program. And they showed, let's see if I can remember the stats, that when they looked at restorative justice schools versus non-restorative justice schools over a period of 3 years, that there was a 128% increase in the reading scores at the restorative justice schools, versus an 11% increase at the non-restorative justice schools. There was a 60% increase in the graduation rate at restorative justice schools, but only a 7% increase in graduation rates at the non-restorative justice schools. There was a 24% decrease in chronic absence at restorative justice schools, but a 62% increase in chronic absence or truancy at non-restorative justice schools. There was I think it was a 56% reduction in the dropout rate at restorative justice schools, with only a 7% reduction in dropout rates at the non-restorative justice schools. So we're seeing just amazing academic outcomes. And it kind of goes back to that whole thing we're talking about. I see you. Let me tell you the story of Cameron. Cameron was a student at one of our pilot schools, a school for juvenile justice-involved youth, a continuation school. When he was 4 years old, he was suspended for the first time. You've heard about the school-to-prison pipeline, yeah? Yes. Okay. So he had separation anxiety when he was 4 years old, so his mother would give him Skittles. And so one day he had his Skittles, and the principal saw him with them unopened. He was not eating them. The principal scolded him, took the Skittles, and went into his office, unlocked it, walked in, and put the Skittles in the bottom desk drawer. Cameron watched every step that the principal took. Principal walked away. Cameron said, "How am I going to get my Skittles back? Oh, there's a window that's open over there. It's up high, and I'm down here, but there's a chair." So he pulled the chair over to the window, climbed on the chair, climbed through the window, and got his Skittles from the bottom desk drawer of the principal's office. When the principal found out, he suspended him for 4 days for theft of his own Skittles, right? And then that started a vicious cycle. By the time he was 16, he had been suspended more than 150 times. And this is a common story for so many of our youth, black and brown youth. He had been arrested multiple times. By the time he was in 11th grade, he just dropped out altogether. Gang banging, homeless. And then they caught up with him and sent him to one of our schools, the school that I was just talking about, the alternative school. So he's sagging, he's got his hoodie on, and he comes into the threshold of the school. Before he could walk through, the principal is embracing him. The vice principal embraces him. Even the school security officer embraces him. They bring him into the principal's office. She pulls out his jacket of 150-something suspensions and multiple arrests and gives it to him and invites him to tear it up and throw it away. Yeah. Go ahead, yeah. Yeah. And she then takes him to the circle room, the restorative justice room. At that time, some young black men are sitting in circle. And he's never seen anything like this before because they're talking about their feelings, you know? They're crying. He's never seen anything like this before. He sits down, and over time, he ends up graduating with a 3.7 GPA and academic honors. And today he works as a youth advocate for Our Joy. Yeah. We were at I think in the Central Valley in Fresno, we were at a training last year, and I bring him with me when we do trainings, and he does public speaking as well. And there were representatives from about 7 school districts there. principals and vice principals and counselors. And at a certain point, I'm sitting next to him, he says, "Hey, Miss Davis, you see those two guys over there in the corner? Those are the ones who tried to expel me, and they had suspended me 3 times from Stockton High." And I looked at him. You know, he had a little smile on his face. He had no resentment, no anger. And then during the break, they came up to him, and they shook his hand, and they had a big smile on their face, and he had a big smile. And he told me later, he said, "Yeah, Ms. Davis, you know, they were trying to suspend me, they were trying to expel me, and now I'm here to teach them that suspensions and expulsions don't work. They don't work for our communities. They don't make our communities safe. They don't work for the schools because they make schools dumber and unsafer. Studies show that schools that suspend a lot have lower academic. You saw that. I was just talking about the results of that test. Yeah. So he just felt a real sense of satisfaction. I did too, of course, that the student is teaching the principal. And this is a story that can be told for many, many, many other youth. And it's so important for us as an organization that we not only provide these services for the youth at the schools where we have our program, but also it's so important to make this public policy. Basically, to make healing a matter of public policy. It's not just something that happens between you and me on interpersonal levels. Yes, it does happen there. And it is elevated to the level of public policy. That is what is so needed in this whole world today, not just at schools. So, back to what restorative justice is. You know, I didn't put on my timer. How much time do I have now, Jim? No, come on. No, I don't. I like to have more exchange anyway. Yeah. Okay. About 5 more minutes then. So, you could say that the difference between the regular justice system, criminal justice, and restorative justice is in the types of questions that each ask. Our predominant justice system asks 3 questions. What law was broken? Who broke it? What punishment is deserved? You could sum up our criminal justice system just in that way. What law was broken? Who broke it? What punishment is deserved? So it's focused on the person doing the wrong. It's focused on punishment. It's focused on broken laws and rules. Restorative justice says, who was harmed? You know? What is the harm here? And what are the needs and the responsibilities of those impacted? And how do all impacted come together to heal the harm as much as possible? You could say that ours is a system that harms people who harm people to show that harming people is wrong. Yeah? Ours is a system that harms people who harm people to show that harming people is wrong. But what happens? The harm gets replicated and reproduced. And as Victor was saying, when you're harmed, if that harm isn't healed, you're going to harm somebody else or you're going to harm yourself. So that sets off this endless cycle of harm until it just metastasizes and pervades our culture, saturates our existence. Harm all around us. Restorative justice seeks to create that endless cycle of healing because we know that if harmed people are healed, they go on to heal other people. And I rest my case. Here is Exhibit A. Right? Harmed people, once they are healed, go on to heal other people and create that healing cycle. So this is a lot of the work. This is really the essence of the work that we're doing. We have these circles, I just want to tell you what happens a little bit in these circles, and then I want to take some questions from you all. Say Tommy's got his head on the desk. The teacher says, Tommy, raise your head. Tommy doesn't move. She asks again, Tommy, raise your head. He still doesn't move. Tommy, raise your head. And he jumps up and, with all that energy, in a threatening way, starts yelling at her. And then it goes out into the hallway. And the principal hears it. There's a scene. The restorative justice coordinator comes. The principal is ready to call security. You are out of here. You violated the rule. You must be punished. Your punishment is 10 days. You gotta have consequences. Yeah. Restorative justice coordinator said, Principal, can I try something different? Can I take him to the restorative justice room? Principal reluctantly agrees. He takes Tommy to the room. Tommy's still angry. You can call my mama, I don't care. I don't care if you suspend me. And he even tries to take a swing at a certain point at the restorative justice coordinator. But finally, the restorative justice coordinator says, are you okay? Are you okay, Tommy? That calms him down for the first time in this interaction. Somebody asking him, are you okay? No, I'm not okay. They go to the restorative justice room, and Tommy shares the story. My mama has relapsed. She hadn't been home for 3 nights. And I got a sister and a brother. And I've been feeding them. The food is all gone now. I've been getting them off to school. I'm tired. I'm scared. So when the restorative justice coordinator tells the principal says, we were about to kick that kid out in the streets when what he deserves is a medal. So there's a circle. The teacher is there, Tommy is there, the restorative justice coordinator has found the mother. The principal is there, I think a couple of students are there. And they create a safe space. There's some preparation that's done so everybody knows what to expect. They don't come in cold, right? That's important when you're bringing together persons who harmed with persons who are harmed with persons who caused harm. You can't bring them together willy-nilly. You got to prepare them, right? Yeah, because it could be, we could have some more harm going on otherwise. So they're prepared, and we do relationship building, trust building, community building. We may do a ceremony, a breathing exercise, or some kind of movement to ground everyone so that they can really speak from their hearts. And we do all of that that's not preparatory work, but that relationship building and trust building work, and then we get to the hard part of the conversation. We don't go in there and say, we're going to deal with this first off. We work on relationship building, sharing stories, listening to one another from the heart and with respect. So the teacher hears Tommy's story. Of course, she's very moved. And then the teacher tells her story. Last year, I was actually attacked by a student. And this year, when it looked like you were going to attack me, I was ready to quit just 2 days ago. And Tommy apologizes and asks what he can do to make it right. She says, just come to my classroom for the next 2 weeks and help me with chores. That's fine. And she says, what I'm going to do, I take responsibility too for what happened. Next time, I'm not going to front a student like I did with him. I'm going to be more discreet and maybe take him into the hallway and ask, well, what's going on? And not assume that they're trying to diss me, just because they don't do what I want them to do when I want them to do it. So she gets to be heard and to take responsibility. Tommy gets to be heard and take responsibility. And the mother also took quite a bit of responsibility. And we helped direct her to resources to address her addiction issue as well. So this is a kind of This is the kind of process that we are trying to use for all of our children so that they won't get pushed into the school-to-prison pipeline. The school-to-prison pipeline is an echo of strategies of mass incarceration. Since 1970, incarceration rates have increased 700%. They're starting to level off a little bit now. But of course, you know that we've got 5% of the people in the world, but 25% of the incarcerated people. We are a prison nation. And then echoing that steep increase in incarceration is the school-to-prison pipeline, the use of suspensions and school-based arrests, which end up pushing our youth into prisons. So a lot of our work is about healing everybody in that circle, and also about social justice in the sense of interrupting the school-to-prison pipeline, interrupting strategies of mass incarceration. Yeah. I think I'm going to stop there and ask for questions. You still awake? Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
When you talk to educators and teachers about using the restorative justice, do you ever get a lot of specific on consequences or how?
All the time, yeah, all the time. So we do a lot of training. We don't start with statistics, but we make sure that they have the statistics that suspending doesn't work, you know. It makes schools less safe. It increases violence. The studies from UCLA Civil Rights Project, there's a whole bunch of studies, basically, that show that suspensions make our communities less safe, our schools less safe, and they also funnel our youth to prison. And teachers are good. They didn't get educated for this result. So they hear that. But more important than those cognitive kind of approaches is to sit in circle and experience the deep connection, that deep sense of interrelatedness, that deep sense of belonging, that deep sense that one has a voice that is being heard, and that one is being seen. That is what will make the difference, having that embodied experience of restorative justice. The statistics are important, but having that experience is really important as well. So before we go into a school, we train as many teachers as possible so that they can facilitate these circle processes, and so that they understand, too, this new way of being present to the students. Are you okay, Tommy? As opposed to, get out of here, Tommy, you know? Responding to the students and to one another in ways that bring just a sense of connection. Yeah. So the trainings are really important for that, and the experiences. And the teachers, too, are using this amongst themselves. They use the circle process for their meetings. It's not just something we do for the kids. It's something that we do ourselves. Yeah.
I have a comment and also a question.
Yeah, sure.
We met your sister and she's wonderful.
Okay.
Great woman. To our school system, and I volunteer for over 18 years in most of our city schools, do not suspend anymore. What they do is they send kids to OC, where they just sit there all day long.
What is OC?
It's kind of like a in-home suspension.
In school detention. Yeah. Okay.
They stopped suspending them
Yeah.
because of the money factor.
Yes.
But
Yes.
they don't do anything with the kids. And so I actually have sat with these kids before, and they literally do nothing for an hour and a half, 2 hours, basically. So how could we bring something like restorative justice to our school system, A, and B, what would we need to do to become a restorative justice intervention person?
Okay. The second question first. To become a restorative justice coordinator, you would need to take a training. We just did a training for restorative justice coordinators to certify them. It was a 5-day training that we did in June. We'll probably do another 5-day in the summer. But there are also trainings going on through the year, both by Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth and Oakland Unified School District. And then to become, where's your school district, by the way?
City School District, so
Oh.
we have our city schools, which there was a lot of suspensions in the junior high.
Uh-huh.
So they now combine a lot of the grade schools with junior high. Junior high is like, used to be 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade now.
Oh, okay.
And then they have two continuation schools. One does not offer college prep classes. It's basically kind of like a babysitting for high
Yes.
school students.
Yeah.
And so they have a lot of campus police there. And there's not a lot of things to help the young people with
Yeah.
their
Yeah,
problems.
yeah. Well, back to the in-school detention. Yeah, that's not really, that's just sort of going through the motions. Yeah, the law says we can't suspend anymore, so we're just going to, sometimes schools will send them home and not write it down. The idea is that students are losing instructional time, whether they're, in a room or out in the streets or at home. And that's not really helping, ultimately, because we know when our kids lose instructional time, they are probably going to drop out, and when they drop out, they are going to be incarcerated. It's like 70% of the chance in Oakland. Youth who drop out have a 70% likelihood of being incarcerated. So that's not helping, really, to lose all of that instructional time. So what needs to happen is that, first of all, teachers need to be trained. And also, first of all, you need to identify someone at the school to be a restorative justice coordinator or hire someone. There needs to be someone who's going to take this work on, someone who's experienced and someone who's skilled. And there's a whole series of trainings that we do, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 1 is just for community circles. They don't necessarily involve harm or conflict. Tier 2 would involve harm or conflict, and Tier 3 is for reentry, when youth are returning from a period of incarceration. So you would get training in those 3 tiers. The teachers all of the teachers, the school security officers, the cafeteria workers, the support staff would get training in Tier 1. But Tier 2 would be for those who are in charge of discipline primarily, as well as Tier 3. But so it's really a climate transformation. So everyone in the school has to be involved. It's not just a program where teachers will send their kids who are acting up to be restored and then sent back. Everyone is involved. The reason there were no fights at this juvenile justice involved, or at this continuation school for juvenile justice involved youth, the reason there were no fights for 2 years is because everybody was responding restoratively. Everybody knew how to do restorative conversations. The school security officers, the cafeteria workers, as well as the teachers and the administrators. So it's a school-wide, we call it a whole school approach. So it takes time, it takes 3 to 4 years, really, for the full impact to be felt. But you start with training, and you start with finding someone who's going to shepherd this transformation. And this person who's your restorative justice coordinator has got to be very skilled, because they will be training teachers. They will be training principals. They're not just like an after-school program coordinator. They have to be highly skilled. Yeah. Okay. Yes?
How do you deal with the issue of spanking? Because not to come into the picture with parents, and dad starts up before the children go to school. I hear it all the time that spanking is an answer, and people don't want to give that up as a discipline, they call it.
Yeah, that's a very complicated question. I was spanked when I was growing up, and probably Victor was too. Oh, yeah. I mean, black people, we did that. We did that, and we do that. But I'm coming to think that that's really a legacy of slavery, where violence was just pervasive, it's just, words fail me. You know, the degree to which violence was a part of our lives as slaves is overwhelming. And sometimes they would say, I'm going to beat you because I know I don't want, you know, the slave master to beat you because they're going to really beat you. But I want to make sure you do it right now so they don't do it. Because if they do it, you know, it's all over for you. So there's a way that this, you know, hurt people hurt people. It gets back to those cycles of trauma, perpetually reenacting themselves until they are interrupted with some sort of healing. So, I mean, I didn't spank my daughter, personally. But, you know, I'm just now beginning to think that if I were to do it, even though I didn't spank my daughter, wasn't opposed to spanking per se, because that's what I grew up with, and I turned out all right. My sister and brother turned out all right, so it must have been good. It was a good thing, right? But I'm really beginning to move away from that and understand it more as a continuing legacy of the ubiquitous, pervasive forms of violence that we were subjected to, and how they remain alive today. Yeah. Yes, right here.
You were implementing the program. What was the biggest barrier that you ran into implementing it? And what was the hardest group to advance?
Hardest group. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just reflecting like that because it was more personalities more than, you know, some principals were very, very supportive, you know. Some teachers were not supportive, so I can't say that within the group, you had early adopters and you had resistors, whether you're talking about administrators or teachers. This was difficult, I found. You'd have a principal who'd see all of the data, you know, like 1 in 3 black men, you know, are incarcerated, 1 in 17 whites are incarcerated. And it all starts with the school-to-prison pipeline. Black boys are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white boys. Then, you know, 21 times more likely to be killed by police than whites, right? 10 times more likely to be incarcerated. So, you know, all the statistics about how suspensions are actually harmful, even the Pediatric Association of America has said we must stop using suspensions because they hurt children, they hurt families, they hurt communities. And 3 years ago, they recommended strongly that we stop using suspensions. So we would give the principals and vice principals and other administrators all this data. And they'd say, oh, yes. And we'd also give them the data, of course, about restorative justice and how restorative justice can really interrupt these cycles, and interrupt the school-to-prison pipeline and so forth. And so they'd say, yeah, okay, let's do this. We want to do this. This will work for our kids. This will work. So we start the program, and then maybe 2 months later, there's a big fight. 85 kids are involved, you know. And the principal's knee-jerk reaction is to suspend them all. Yeah. Even though he gave us lip service, when it came down to it, the parents are demanding this, the community's demanding this, all this pressure is on me. I got to show we have consequences here. I got to show I'm tough. So rather than a person being most difficult, is really a mindset. Yeah, that punitive, somehow, you know, it's a slap on the wrist, or you're coddling the criminals when you do restorative justice. But in fact, it's harder for you to sit in circle across from the person that you have hurt and take responsibility to man up, woman up, you know, and say I'm sorry and mean it. It's much harder than just being, you know, sent to the streets for 5 days or sent to prison for 5 years where you don't ever have to think about what you did. So it's that mindset thinking that punitive responses is the most effective ways. Anything else is coddling the criminals. So that is, now for that principle, once we got her encircled, and she experienced some really profound transformation and connection. I mean, laughter, tears, deep, deep connection when facilitated properly. Then she made that shift. After it got out of here and she saw how youth are transforming themselves, then she made that shift, that she transformed herself. And speaking of which, we have maybe like 30, we had 30 youth in our office like last night doing a circle. They do circles amongst themselves. A lot of these are formerly incarcerated youth. And they're going out and doing circles in the community to stop gang violence. They're doing circles with girls who've been sexually exploited. Yeah, that's that cycle of healing. Mm-hmm. I saw a question here.
I'm not sure if you answered this or just did. I heard Assistant Police Chief at Richmond, Ed Medina, talk about the changes they've made in Richmond. And it takes about 10 years to make a difference. What has your program done to the police force of Oakland? Have you been able to impact changes in?
Yeah, we're working on that. We have trained about 40 Oakland police officers in restorative justice. And youth have sat in circle with police officers. After Ferguson and Staten Island and Baltimore and too many other incidents of that nature, the mayor called our organization and said that she and the police chief and other law enforcement officials wanted to sit in circle with youth, with 100 youth. This was a new mayor of Oakland. She said, in my first 100 days of office, I want to sit in circle with 100 youth. Not a big circle, one big circle of 100 youth. Because we can't, these are intimate, usually, we can't have more than 15 to 20 people, 25 at the most in a circle. But she did that, and she brought her police chief, she brought her deputies, and other city officials. And they talked about what's going on in the world. How, what is it like for you, as a young man, Latino, Black, growing up in Oakland, And how does it feel, when you hear about Ferguson, or when you hear about Baltimore, when you hear about another killing? Well, it makes me want to stay inside, A middle school is answering. I was in a circle where that was his answer. I don't want to leave the house, A child, who should be out in the sun and playing and is afraid to leave the house. But anyway, these kinds of circles are happening. 10 of them were held last spring. And so we're developing a relationship. This work is all about relationship building. And so they've called on us since then to do some more circles with some community incidents that have occurred. But we've also trained probation officers, and we've trained some judges, Yeah. Mm-hmm. Your what?
Higher education.
Yes.
Will this be used in New York City colleges, if possible?
Yeah. Yes. Colleges are using it when things happen, when there is a rule infraction of some sort, rather than suspending the student in higher education from college for a semester or whatever the period of time, they are doing circle processes. In higher education? In higher education or just generally? Oh, we have not personally done programs in higher education. These are programs that I know of. Restorative justice is a movement is about 40 years old, and it's just really taking off. It's just been taking off in the last 10 years. So even when we started, we were the only kid on the block, only organization doing work with youth. Now there's about, I counted it up the other day, 11 to 14 youth-focused organizations doing this work. And internationally, this work is growing very, very rapidly. So do you want to revise your question now that you know that we don't, we are working in schools in Oakland, and I talked about that earlier. There are programs now in 30 schools, but I should make it clear that those are not my organization's programs. My organization has trained the school and has provided technical assistance for them to create their own programs. And that's exactly what they've done. We can walk away, and the work will continue, and we can go somewhere else. And we are increasingly doing more trainings nationally. Yep. We're also working in the juvenile justice system. That's a long conversation. I think we're getting near the end. And we're beginning to work in the community as well. I told you about the 30 youth who were in Circle last night. A lot of them are formerly incarcerated, but they're doing work in the community to stop gang violence. And we find that, say, if a murder occurs, a homicide occurs, if there's a circle of this sort, then there's usually no retaliation. So that's some of the work that they're doing in the community. So juvenile justice system, schools, and community, and then training all over the country as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I'm getting the feeling that we should be winding down, yeah? One more question, maybe? Not even one? Oh, okay. No, wait, let's see if anybody else, because I know you got one. No other questions? Okay, good. Mm-hmm.
Just the recent situation with the police officer and the student in Ohio, where she was dragged out of her seat. You know, a lot of parents or a lot of people are, you know, saying like she should have been spanked more as a child. She should have listened. You know, it's victim blaming her. And you know, I think to myself, I'm like, no, something else. And people are like, well, what else? And it's like, restorative justice could have been there. And I just want to say thank you for bringing, because we need that. And that could have been something that could have helped that situation. You know, somebody going in there and saying, are you okay? What's wrong?
Exactly,
You know,
yeah.
He just put his hands on her. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I think a relative or a mother.
It was her mother
She
that
was
did
in
the-
foster.
And she was in foster care.
Foster care. And
Oh, yeah.
And so no one asked
Ah,
no one asked her.
why.
are you okay? What's the matter?
Be in that moment. She was able to feel it. You know, she was
It's like the Tommy story, except they didn't use restorative justice.
They didn't. She had just, yeah, like you said, just been put in foster care.
And there's always a story with our youth. We are so quick, the system is so quick to demonize and criminalize and marginalize and pathologize our youth when they see them behaving in the way this young girl did when she didn't get up immediately on command. There are stories, there are backstories. Almost all of those youth present in our office last night have lost so many friends. By the time they're 17, losing 17 friends to homicide, going to more funerals than I will go to by the time I'm 70. Yeah. Not to mention the sexual exploitation, the incarcerated parents, the domestic violence. Trying to get to school every day. You can't go straight. You got to go these circuitous routes because of gangs and violence. The trauma that our children have to deal with every day is heartbreaking. It was bad enough coming up with racial violence for me personally. But today it's It's that at several orders of magnitude. So I want to close by saying that that history is calling upon us to become healers. We have no future unless we heal ourselves, heal our relationships with one another, heal our relationships with the earth and all of her inhabitants. It's not just a matter of medical doctor healers or acupuncture healers or body worker healers. Whoever we are in the world, whatever we do in the world, history is asking us to learn to be present to one another in ways that bring healing and wholeness, and to shift from being present to one another in ways that harm and bring devastation and bring discord and domination. So I find that restorative justice offers us tools to do that healing work, whether in schools, in the juvenile justice system, in communities, in our families, in our churches, and even to heal mass social harm, structural harm, as in South Africa they use the truth and reconciliation process. So, as a social justice activist, I can never deny that part of me. Also, I know that I can no longer be in the world in a way that only adds to the collective energy of anger and separation and violence. I know that as a social justice activist, I want to be present in ways that bring justice and healing. So I'd like to end with another greeting from the mighty Maasai warriors in Kenya. When they greet one another in the market, on the road, they say, "Kaseri and Njeri." Kaseri and Njeri. Anyone? That means, how are the children? How are the children? Not just your children or my children, but all of our children. They are always asking that question. It's always in the air. It's always on their lips. So, as social justice activists now or to be, I just want to acknowledge you for the work that you do in the world and for who you are in the world. And I know that that ultimately what you do, each of you, will allow us one day to answer the children are well. The earth is well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.